You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I just want to let you know it is official. This century is now of legal drinking age. 2021, congratulations. You've done it. You made it. That's in the U.S. Obviously, elsewhere around the world, UK, probably 18, or as they say in the UK, as long as you can look over the bar, you can probably order a pint there.
I'm sure 2021's had a fake license for quite some time.
Probably has, probably a Georgia license or something like that. You can easily get by. Folks, welcome back to the show. This is the Shoe In Show, the Footwear Industries podcast. This is part of our leadership series as we kick off the new year. Talking to different people in different segments of the industry, focus on different products, on marketplaces, on a number of different things to help kind of stimulate conversation, new ideas, hopefully some optimism as we kick it off. So, Matt, who do we have today to bring forth some great wisdom to our listeners?
Oh, my gosh. We have a ton of wisdom at hand, and that's because Tom Nastos, who's Chief Commercial Officer at Informa Markets, has joined us on Shoe In Show. He's also an FDRA board member, so we twisted his arm incessantly to come on the show. And so, Tom, welcome to the program. And right out of the gate, I want to get your shoe story. This is kind of this quirky thing we ask, but when I know there's a cool shoe story to be had, we definitely ask the question. So talk to me about how you got into the industry and, more importantly, what you did with Pro Keds a number of years ago.
Well, great. And thanks for having me on the show, and appreciate to be here. And yep, 2021, here we go. But, my story actually starts back in the day. And I don't even think I had mentioned this to you, Matt, that originally when I was married, my wife's family was actually in the shoe retailing business here in the city of New York. So that was actually my first time that I was exposed to, retail and also the footwear business. And it was primarily men's, women's, family shoe stores in Brooklyn and in Queens, New York. And it was a great experience. And my wife and I also had a number of shoe stores during that time period. But as we started to, have a family and, we had 3 children, it really became difficult. So ultimately, the shoe stores, became part of my father-in-law's business. And, I went on to the wholesale business. And that's where kind of the Pro Keds story starts. I was a manufacturer of ready-to-wear for many, many years. And I was fortunate that I had partnered up with Rockefeller Records back in 1999, and the hip-hop space was becoming quite popular. And I had multiple brands, Rockaware, State Property, and others that I was associated with Jay-Z, Damon Dash, and Biggs Burke. And at one of the Magic shows, I was kind of walking the floor with a particular hip hop artist, Beanie Siegel, and we saw this little stand. It was actually near one of the former Skechers brands. I think it was 210. Do you guys remember? Was it 210 Racing? Or he had a really magnificent booth, and yeah, right. And it was great. It was a fantastic presentation, and so I see this little brand, Pro Keds, and that artist, Beanie, says, I grew up with Pro Keds. And I was like, wow, okay, that's interesting, because I kind of grew up with Converse. And so he gave me a little bit of the history of Pro Keds, and we went over, and Tom Schlossberg, and I don't know, many of your audience may know the Schlossberg name. His grandfather was actually the founder of Stride Right, and his dad later was the CEO of Stride Right before it became part of Wolverine. And, I was speaking to Tom, and he told me the history, and I said, wow, this is really interesting. And nothing much was really happening with the brand. So I went back and I started to, really discuss it with, many of my retail partners. And ultimately, we decided to make a deal with Stride Right in regard to the Pro Kids brand. And I'm thinking, okay, how hard can this be, right? I mean, hey, it's, I understand the consumer and all this. So I discovered that actually it was very hard. So I invested a great deal of money in my first year. Let me get my calculator out here. I did zero business in my first year. Zero. Yeah. So I was like in the hole tremendously because I discovered the complexity and the difficulty and my whole perception of what it is to manufacture and manage the the SKUs and the difficulty that a great deal of your audience has in producing it. So I had all of a sudden had to go through this enormous learning curve. But what I really did is I then leaned onto the footwear community quite quickly. Right? I was like, wait a minute. These people really know what they're doing. I better align myself. So I spoke to Tom Schlossberg, and there were quite a few others at Stride Right at the time that were very, very supportive. And I said, look, okay, I know fashion, I know the audience, but I'm not a footwear expert. Help. And everybody jumped in to help us. And what happened was it was much more of a collaborative effort between artists, myself understanding the audience together with the artist, and then using footwear professionals to put it out. And what I came out of it is that I discovered that not only is the industry complex and difficult, but there's footwear companies tend to be great marketers. And they know their audience, they know who they're communicating to. And so even though the first year was difficult, the second year we rebounded tremendously. Had an enormous amount of growth in the second and third year, and then ultimately it culminated at the 210 dinner of us winning an award for either best new brand or one of the awards that was offered at the time, and Damon Dash accepted the award on our behalf. So we went from being like novices and not knowing a damn thing of what we were doing. Right. And, and then ultimately being an award winner in December at the event. But it was a great experience. And that was my first experience, other than the retail experience that I described before. And it was a lot of fun, I have to say.
That is a great story. And, what comes to mind is that experience that we all have in the industry of walking a show floor and the things that happen on a show floor that are transactional, that are life-changing, that are create challenges. So that conversation you have about running into the Pro Kids booth, and then that sets you off on this journey. Fast forward a number of years, Tom, and now with Informa, we're talking about this new journey we're on as it relates to what do we do with marketplaces and trade shows and engagement with buyers and exhibitors, et cetera, et cetera. And so as you take that experience and that journey that you were on, and now you look at the journey we're on together right now, talk to us about your thinking about 21 as it relates to marketplaces and trade shows and digital experiences and virtual and travel and blah, blah, all the things that go into what makes creating a vibrant marketplace so important.
Yeah. And I think that even though, I have an opportunity to speak to quite a few brands and, in the footwear community and also in the ready-to-wear. So I have this perspective that's fairly broad, from women's wear to menswear, from footwear to accessories and so forth. And what I find uniquely positive for the footwear community is they do like to get together. Doesn't matter if it's a conference, this podcast, okay. The footwear community enjoys getting together, sharing ideas, being collaborative, sometimes sharing the pain, okay. But there's a value of getting together, as I had described. What my experience was, to unlock. Here was an asset, right? And it was not being utilized, or maximized in any way. And then I was able to bring it to market. And I think that, coupled together with at least what I see is great marketers, okay? Because I feel in many ways, across, whether it's in comfort or luxury, or certainly in the athletic spaces, footwear tends to be really, really good marketers. That gets overlooked, right? And I think that actually bodes well for 2021 and beyond, because marketing skills, because of the digital transition, are going to become even more important than they were in 2019 and before. So when I look at that and I look at where the industry is positioned, I think that ultimately getting together and supporting each other will continuously be important. Now, you could debate the timing, you could debate the location and so forth and so on, but I think that the exchange of ideas, and of course, we were very much positioned as that commercial side, right? This is where you also come and, do business and write orders. I think that will continue, but I do not think it's going to be the way that it was in the past. I think everybody's got to kind of cleanse and think, okay, it is going to be different, but this different may actually be better in the long run.
Hey, Tom, do you think that it's going to be easier for startups and emerging brands to kind of come into market weeks now and have a bigger impact than they have in the past? Because I think one of the challenges that we always see is, and we always hear from leaders, is they really want to encourage startups and new entrepreneurs to come in and bring in new ideas and new product types. But sometimes it's a little hard when they set up a booth or they go to a show and they don't get traffic like they thought that they would. Do we think now it's going to be better and more impactful for that segment as people look to find more unique new product that they can launch to consumers?
Yeah, I actually think that it's substantially easier if you're new to the market to build your audience, right? And build your audience direct with the consumer. And I think that's the big change that has been happening really in the past decade, but has accelerated, another 7 or 8 years and 7 or 8 months, that you build this audience, and brick and mortar has to catch up with that audience building. That's why I said the marketing component. So if you're a young brand today, before, and listen, I was in this space, so I was like, okay, how do I, when I did the Pro Kids deal, my God, these enormous, highly successful sneaker companies, how do I navigate that world, right? And how do I get a little bit of shelf space within the retailer? Well, digitally today, I wouldn't have to worry about that, right? It wouldn't be as big of a concern. So I think you're going to see over the next 4 or 5 years the ability of young designers and brands, as long as they can put together the supply chain and the ability to finance the business, because I think those will be the biggest challenges, because it's a different financial model. Once they put that together, okay, I think that there's going to be an enormous amount of pressure coming from the consumer back to the brands and to the brick and mortar retailers saying, I did discover this online, right? And I think that the industry has to support that, and it will come. And the other thing to take into account is that even though, and what I did learn through my events experience is that, and being from New York and being from the United States, the world always kind of revolved around our domestic market, right? And the world's not like that anymore, right? You have to be a global participant. And you have to know your retailer. You have to know what your digital presence is, and it's going to be global today, right? And you're going to have to participate in that way. The borders have come way down. The only time that there's real pressure, and I think the FDRA has done a great job with this, is when politics get in the way, right? And there's obstacles that come up. But, at the end of the day, I think that design talent and the ability to reach out to the customer is going to win out.
What, you're in a unique position, much like FDRA is, where we talk to a lot of different leaders across the industry, different segments, whether it's brand retailers, et cetera, global companies, small companies. From the last, couple of months of conversations you've had with a wide range of people, what are some common themes that you're hearing from some executives and leaders about 2021? Is it optimism? Is it, are they excited about what's happening? Are they eager to get going? What are some challenges that you're continuing to hear from different folks out there? Just kind of give us a lay of the land as you hear it from executives.
So in the beginning of the pandemic, there was just general concern of like, okay, how's this going to impact my business? What does this mean? And there was a great deal of, I say confusion or misinformation, but is this short term? Is it going to be over by the summer? How is this going to play out and how do I navigate this? And I think we're still kind of going through that process of understanding how in this situation, and this actually kind of happened to me in a different way during the recession in 2008, 2009, that it's not all losers and it's not all winners. There's winners and losers, right? So certain segments, certain businesses excelled and were able to navigate it better than others. So those that were a little bit more digitally savvy or were flexible and managed their inventories, which I think that's an enormous issue in the footwear industry on how to best to do that. Those that were able to manage that were able to navigate it, and I think will, in 2021, rebound quicker. Those that kind of just hold tight to their older model and say, listen, I'm just going to kind of stick with this, may actually go down with the ship. So I think that if you, are part of the group that are beginning to see, and it's a repositioning of your investment, right, of your dollars. Whether it's putting more dollars towards digital, it actually does work in our analysis when we're speaking to quite a few chief executives, that whether it's brick and mortar or digital or your own retail store, it's all circular. So if you make an investment and you're building an audience directly, that may actually also help your brick and mortar partner to bring audiences and say, yeah, I'm familiar with that brand. I want to buy that brand, or I love that shoe. So I think the better you are at closing that loop from a consumer basis, those people are going to be far more optimistic. And I see our role being more and more helping people navigate that part of the business.
Yeah, I think that's so critical, Tom. I think companies need that help navigating, but I also think that product is king right now. And just, we were talking to another leader about how quickly the pandemic has forced the industry to digitize and to innovate in ways that could never have been done on its own without some external pressure like a global pandemic. And that just brings to mind these transformational shifts just in style and in utility and going more casual and more athletic and athleisure and active and all that stuff. How do brands utilizing marketplaces and the digital connectivity with consumers and with potential with potential buyers, how do they figure out what's coming next on the trend side? Is there still discovery opportunities via the digital platforms that you all provide? And what are the best ways to navigate that so that you know that you're designing, developing, sourcing, and selling the shoes that consumers want?
So, when you look at the marketplaces, and it applies to, all of fashion, footwear, ready to wear, I think there was a tendency that, and this is rarely discussed, but I think there was a tendency to kind of drive looking in the rearview mirror. And that generally creates accidents. And you're seeing that with quite a few brick and mortar retailers that, would basically take the safe route and say, well, this performed for me in 19 or 20 and 21, and would be very repetitive in the product. Kind of goes back to your question before that you both asked in regard to new product. And that's not how consumers think. So even though, for example, we're very much about comfort, and stay at home and home goods, for example, in our analysis has had a fantastic year. And, if you were in the athletic or casual part, you fared better. Going forward, there's no guarantee for that, right? And as you begin to, if you have a deep understanding of your customer, right, then there's going to be a rebound and you have to position yourself. So I don't want to, sit there and say, well, evening dresses or, dress shoes or, will trend upward, okay, because that's a specific prediction. But what I am saying is that the trends are going to change faster, consumer driven, and you're going to have to be on top of it even quicker. And there's plenty of resources available to everybody, including from us, to help people navigate that. But the trend has to be coupled together with data and analytics. If you put both together, right? And that's why the digital platform that we did at Informa was so critical, that we were able there's plenty of information on B2C, but to begin to get greater understanding on the B2B side of, together with trends, what you visually see at a trade show, for example, and then couple that together with actual data of what actually transpired, okay, will give you greater insights on what your purchases should be. I think that will be one key coming out of this pandemic.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think the key thing that we all have to think a lot about is we're getting all this data. We're collecting a ton of data, and how are we making sense of it to mesh with what our guts tell us and know about the consumer. So it's I think what you're saying is really smart, because it's an interplay of knowing the industry, knowing the consumer, and using the data to support that. And sometimes being led by data, but sometimes not being led by data. And it's just this whole thing in 2021, I think, is a lot about wisdom. We have to get back to being wise about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And hopefully 2020 was that reset to look at marketplaces and why and where and when, and look at our operations and look at our consumers and how we're talking to them. And so I think, Tom, you're nailing it on all those points. And I know our time is short here, so I do want to bring in Jasmine to bring us into our Fashion, Footwear, and Focus segment that is famous worldwide, where she helps us become a little bit more fashionable and understand some of these trends, even as we're, in many times, still quarantined in our home. Jasmine.
Yes. So, okay. Of course, I've talked about collaborations in the podcast a bunch. And for 2021, one of the first ones that I saw was Vans has a collaboration with Where's Waldo. And I remember doing that little game in the kids magazines when I was younger. So I was wondering if that was something that you guys experienced too. And then too, I think it's interesting, the Snoop Dogg wine is really popular right now. And I think part of it is because it's interactive. And I think the same with this Where's Waldo collaboration, it does give people okay, let me pick up the shoe and, see if I can find him. I think the interactive piece of product is becoming more popular now.
I loved Where's Waldo when I was a kid. And I've been at many of Magic platform shows, Ecom America shows, scanning the floor for Andy because we have to meet up for somewhere. And it was a Where's Andy activity. So I love the collaboration with Vans that they've done. And it'll be interesting to see how many more collabs are out there in 2021. And if they'll have the same street cred, if you will, to drive sales, or if people are just kind of over them. I'm not quite sure.
Right.
Yeah, I'll chime in too. I think collaborations will continue to be important. They may take a different form. Back in the day when I had mentioned to you as far as what I did with Pro Kids, not coming from the industry, I by walking, the show floor, I actually did collaborate at the time with New Era Caps and Jordan, with Jordan footwear. And, and my collaboration with them was not necessarily on a branded side, but I said, look, I also have ready to wear apparel. Maybe we should work together from a color perspective, right? So there's all different type of collaboration. So when product hit the retail floor, not that the consumer would know this, but, New Era Caps happened to have worked with my Pro-Ked sneakers, right? So it wasn't genius, but it was something that worked. Then collaborations with celebrities, we actually did that, right? In 99 and 2000 with Rockefeller Record and all of their artists. So I think that will continue, but I think you're going to see more collaboration sharing social media audiences. I think that is the new marketing, right? I was in an event in Milan just before the pandemic. And it was actually a Moncler event in Milan, and they had collaborated with it was literally 12 young designers. And, it was a physical event, but the social media impact, I got to tell you, I was taken aback, because not only did Moncler have, for example, 10 million on their social media platform, but each one of those young brands brought another 500,000 to 1 million followers.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, that 10 million became 25 million. And so the power of the collaborations that Jasmine brought up, if you put that together with what's happening in social media and the impact that it will have, that unlocked for Moncler an enormous amount of value. So it was well worth it. So that's how also events are going to evolve, right? That you close this loop. These are the things that we've analyzed. So I think it's quite exciting.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. To quote Whitney Houston, I believe that collaborations are the future. And I think it's so important that they have these injections of collaborations to keep product fresh, keep it fun, learn from the consumer what they like, keep up with things. And I think it's just, I'm sure it's very hard. And Matt, maybe we'll have somebody come on who's done some collabs and focused on that in particular the last 12 months in this pandemic that they've launched some of those. But I'm sure it's very hard to do, but it's also, I'm sure, very rewarding to have that and keep that buzz going. Because I think Tom has really talked about today about how good our brands and companies are at marketing. And we'll have to continue to be more and more as we think, a little bit smaller right now because we've been in our homes a lot. But as soon as we're able to get back out and start traveling again, we're seeing more and more competition from brands globally. So U.S. brands in particular are going to have to keep stepping up their game. And I think collaborations in that sense, is one big way to do that. So completely agree with that. Tom, really want to thank you for your thoughts and your ideas today and sharing your insights and sharing your shoe story. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on. And, look, I'm looking forward to a much, much better 2021 for the entire industry. We're here to support everybody in what their goals are. And I also appreciate all the work that, the FDRA, Matt, and the entire board is doing. I think that, navigating these times is not easy, but, certainly with everybody's support, I think we're going to have a much brighter future. So thank you.
Well said. Thank you. Folks, as always, shoeinshow.com is our website. You can find our full catalog there. If you have ideas for who we should have on the show or topics we should discuss, this is your podcast. It's the industry's podcast. Please let us know. Just drop us a line. There's a little voice note on the bottom left corner of shoeinshow.com where you can just click it. You can share comments on our shows. You can drop us a message. And if it's really good, we may play it on air. So please drop us lines as always. Tell us about what you're hearing, what you're doing, your challenges. And we'd love to hear from you. And as always, rate us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. 4 stars, please, only. But on behalf of Matt, myself, Jasmine, and our guest Tom, we really want to thank you for taking the time to listen to our kind of roundtable discussion today about the marketplace and about what brands are doing and the innovations, and hopefully some optimism for you as we keep going forward into 2021. Be safe, be healthy, keep wearing those masks, and until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.